Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're the show that digs into complex business stories, cuts through all the jargon from earnings calls and press releases, and really gives you the insights that matter.
That's right.
And today we're looking at a company that started from this really personal, almost kind of awkward family moment. But now it's got these huge ambitions to shake up the entire, $4.9 trillion U.S. healthcare market. We're talking about HIMS and HERS.
Yeah, and when you say awkward, you really mean it. I mean, the story goes that founder Andrew Dudum was literally at a family dinner back in 2017,
Right.
and his older sister, who happens to be a dermatologist, just laid into him, called his face ashy, wrinkly, pimply, the works.
Ouch. Family dinners, right?
Exactly, and she didn't stop there. She apparently grabbed his credit card and bought him like $300 worth of these fancy women's skincare products on the spot.
Wow. $300.
Yeah, $300 for face cream. And that sort of outrageous price for what should be pretty basic wellness stuff, it just highlighted this massive problem in the market, especially for men.
What kind of problem are we talking?
Well, think about it. Super high prices, stuff being really hard to get, total inconvenience, and maybe the biggest one, this huge stigma around, actually asking for help for things like hair loss or mental health.
Yeah, those topics are definitely not locker room talk traditionally.
Not at all. The whole system just wasn't set up for a regular person, especially a guy, to easily or affordably get care for those things. It was broken.
So that dinner table critique, that outrage, that was the spark.
That was pretty much it. HIMS launched later that year, 2017. Initially, they were really focused on making it okay to talk about and get help for things like hair loss and erectile dysfunction, things people just didn't discuss.
And then HERS came along.
Yep, a year later, they launched HERS, the sister brand. And today, their big mission, their core idea, is basically to help people feel great by making good health accessible. Affordable, convenient.
Accessible, affordable, convenient. Sounds simple, but incredibly hard in healthcare.
Absolutely. And that's what we're diving into today. We want to go way past just the headline numbers. We're going to dig into their latest financials, those Q3 2025 results.
Okay.
We'll break down what makes them different, their competitive advantages, what people call their moat. And maybe most importantly, we'll explore the big, ambitious growth plans HIMS and HERS has to really become this major player, moving beyond just wellness into a full-on multi-specialty healthcare company.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start right at the beginning. How exactly did HIMS and HERS manage to break that old, frankly painful, traditional healthcare model? Because it wasn't just about putting forms online, right? They really rethought the whole patient experience.
Oh, completely. The fundamental disruption is they made getting healthcare feel, well, less like going to a clinic and maybe more like ordering something online, like from Amazon or streaming on Netflix. It's built on being digital first and direct-to-consumer DTC.
Right, DTC. We hear that a lot.
Yeah, and think about the old way. It's just a mess, right? Endless paperwork, sitting in waiting rooms forever, getting confusing referrals, juggling doctors, hospitals, pharmacies, insurance companies.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Exactly. HIMS basically pulls that whole fragmented, messy journey together onto one single, smooth platform, their website and app, like an e-commerce experience for your health.
And a huge part of that is speed, I imagine, getting rid of all those delays.
Speed is absolutely one of their biggest selling points. You skip the phone tag, you skip waiting weeks, maybe months for an appointment, you skip the back and forth with the pharmacy.
Yeah.
They set it up so you can have a virtual consultation, get a prescription sorted out quickly, and manage follow-up care all in one place. They even use services like Uber and DoorDash for some products, getting them to you super fast.
On-demand delivery for prescriptions, that's pretty different.
It is. We're talking about connecting with a licensed doctor or nurse practitioner, usually within 24 to 48 hours. That kind of speed is it's revolutionary compared to the weeks of waiting and uncertainty in the old system.
Okay, so it's fast, it's digital. What about the money side? You mentioned the subscription model and the cash pay approach. Let's break those down.
Yeah, so the subscription part is pretty straightforward. It gives them stable, predictable revenue coming in every month, and it helps keep customers engaged, maximizing retention.
Makes sense. Like any subscription service.
Exactly. But the really bold move, the thing that truly sets them apart in the U.S. healthcare maze, is deciding not to work with insurance companies. The cash pay model.
Okay, that seems counterintuitive. Doesn't that cut off a lot of potential customers who rely on insurance?
It definitely could, and it does limit their market in some ways. They're targeting people who are willing and able to pay out of pocket. But it was a very calculated decision, and it gives them some major advantages. Well, Three big things. First, price transparency. You know exactly what you're paying each month upfront. No surprises.
Unlike insurance bills.
Exactly. No confusing explanation of benefits months later. No surprise bills. Second, it dramatically cuts down their administrative costs. They don't need armies of people dealing with insurance claims, denials, pre-authorizations.
All that bureaucracy just vanishes.
Pretty much. And third, it makes the whole transaction way simpler. For the customer, there are zero calls to the insurance company, zero weird denial letters, zero hoops to jump through. It's just click, pay, receive care.
So simplicity and known costs. But again, doesn't this mean they're only serving people who can afford it and maybe focusing on less complex issues where insurance isn't as critical?
That's largely true, especially initially, and that was part of the strategy. They started with conditions that are often chronic but manageable. And crucially, where people really value privacy and convenience, think hair loss, ED, basic dermatology, mental health support.
Things people might not want to run through their employer's insurance plan anyway.
Precisely. For many of those customers, the ease, the privacy, and the relatively low predictable cost were more important than trying to navigate insurance. Plus, from a business perspective, getting paid immediately with cash is way better than waiting months to chase down insurance reimbursements. It gives them much better cash flow and predictability.
Okay, so the business model is disruptive. But what about protecting that business? You mentioned a moat. How have they built defenses? It seems like branding played a surprisingly big role.
It really did, and it's not what you'd typically expect in healthcare. Their branding and marketing were, frankly, kind of genius and definitely unconventional.
How so?
They used humor. They used empathy. They made talking about really awkward subjects feel, well, normal. They tackled things like ED, premature ejaculation, anxiety, depression head on, but in this really approachable, relatable way.
Taking the stigma out of it.
Exactly. They basically said, hey, this is normal, lots of people deal with this, and it's okay to get help. That accessible human brand voice resonated incredibly well, especially with younger demographics, and it allowed them to grab market share like crazy.
And the numbers back that up, that the branding actually drove growth.
Oh, absolutely. The data we have shows HIMS holds something like 47% market share among the DTC digital health services that were observed. That's not just a good share, that's market leadership. It proves that approach destigmatizing through relatable branding really worked. It built trust quickly and brought customers in the door at scale.
But it's not just clever ads.
Yeah.
Right? You mentioned they backed it up with serious infrastructure. This isn't just a website farming out orders anymore.
That's a critical point. To really deliver on the promise of quality, affordability, and speed, they realized they needed to control the process, so they started vertically integrating. Big time.
Meaning they own the supply chain.
Pretty much. They've built out this massive internal fulfillment and manufacturing footprint. We're talking over 700,000 square feet across the country now.
Wow, 700,000 square feet. That's serious.
It is. It means they control the making and shipping of many of their products. This helps ensure quality, keeps costs down, and means they aren't dependent on third-party suppliers who might jack up prices or run out of capacity.
And part of that infrastructure involves these specialized pharmacies, right? The 503A and 503B facilities. Can you explain the difference there for us? Because that seems important, especially with some of the regulatory stuff we'll get into later.
Yeah, it's a key distinction. Think of a 503A compounding pharmacy like a local artisan bakery. They make a specific cake, or in this case, medication, for one specific person based on a doctor's unique prescription. It's highly customized, patient-specific.
Okay, one-off custom jobs.
Right. Now, a 503B facility, which they got access to partly through acquiring a company called Medisource or Ox, is more like a big industrial bakery operating under really strict hygiene and quality rules, FDA rules. A 503B can make large batches of standardized drugs before any specific prescriptions come in.
So 503A is personalized for one patient. 503B is like mass production, but still customized compared to off-the-shelf drugs and done under stricter controls.
Exactly. 503B allows for scale and consistency under tight FDA oversight for compounded meds. And they didn't stop at pharmacies. They also bought a company called Tribe Labs for about $5 million.
What does Tribe Labs do?
They specialize in at-home lab testing. So now HIMS has its own capability for customers to do diagnostic tests conveniently at home.
Ah, closing the loop. Testing, diagnosis, treatment.
Precisely. And then they spent $39 million to acquire CS Bio Co.
CS Bio, what's their specialty?
Peptide synthesis. making the building blocks for certain kinds of advanced treatments. Peptides are becoming huge in areas like hormone health and longevity.
Okay, so these acquisitions, pharmacies, labs, peptide manufacturing, they aren't random. They're building blocks for something bigger.
Absolutely foundational. They're setting the stage to move beyond simple pills and into more complex, personalized treatments. Think custom formulations, hormone therapies, maybe even longevity treatments down the line. They're building the infrastructure now for the specialties they plan to dominate later.
Which leads us perfectly into what you said is maybe their most crucial long-term strategy,
Yeah.
evolving from just telehealth into this deeply personalized healthcare platform powered by AI.
Yes, personalization is really the name of the game for them going forward. It's the core value proposition. They're moving away from that old, here's the standard pill for everyone with condition X approach.
So how does that work in practice?
Well, take hair loss, for example. Instead of just a standard pill, maybe they offer you a custom topical spray. It might have multiple active ingredients. Maybe the dosages are tweaked just for you based on your specific situation, your lifestyle, maybe even genetic factors down the line.
Tailoring the treatment, not just the diagnosis.
Exactly. Custom doses, different ways to take the medicine, like sprays instead of pills, even combining treatments for multiple conditions into one plan. That's the goal, maximizing how well the treatment works for each specific person.
But doing that kind of detailed personalization for, millions of customers sounds incredibly difficult. How do they scale that without needing an impossible number of doctors spending hours on each case?
That's where the tech comes in. They've developed their own proprietary software called MedMatch.
MedMatch, okay, what is that?
Think of MedMatch as this AI-powered brain sitting between the patient data and the healthcare provider. It takes in and analyzes tons of anonymized data from millions of patient interactions, everything from those initial intake forms to how well treatments are working based on follow-ups, even lab results from things like tribe labs.
So it learns from every patient interaction.
Continuously. And it uses all that data to give the doctors and nurse practitioners on their platform really specific data-driven recommendations for treatment plans. It helps them make smarter, more precise decisions for each individual faster than they could on their own.
So the providers get AI assistance to personalize care at scale.
That's the idea. And it creates this really powerful positive feedback loop, or flywheel as they call it. More subscribers means more data flowing into MedMatch. More data makes MedMatch smarter and its recommendations better. Better recommendations lead to better patient outcomes. The treatments work better.
And better outcomes attract more subscribers, feeding more data back into the system.
You got it. It's a closed-loop system that should, in theory, just keep getting better and better. And that's a really hard advantage for competitors to copy.
Yeah, because someone like Amazon might have logistics, but they don't necessarily have this focused, vertically integrated healthcare data stream feeding an AI like MedMatch.
Exactly. That proprietary data and the AI built on it is a key part of their moat, and we're seeing signs it's working. As of the latest numbers, Q3 2025, they reported 1.6 million subscribers using these personalized offerings.
1.6 million. How does that compare?
That's up a huge 50% from the year before, and maybe even more telling, the number of subscribers who are using personalized plans for multiple conditions like hair loss and mental health, or ED and skincare.
Which means they're really integrated into the platform.
Totally. Those multi-condition subscribers grew over 80% year over year, and they now make up more than 20% of all subscribers. That shows real stickiness and the success of the platform strategy. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what this all means, the DTC model, the vertical integration, the personalization flywheel, is that HIMS isn't just about selling pills online anymore. They're fundamentally shifting the relationship. They're aiming to become an ongoing health partner, not just a place you go when something flares up. That personalization drives loyalty, better results, and ultimately a much higher lifetime value for each customer they bring in.
Okay, so that's the foundation and the strategy. Now let's dig into the recent performance. HIMS and HERS just reported their Q3 2025 results. You mentioned strong overall numbers, but also some choppiness beneath the surface earlier this year.
Yeah, the Q3 numbers themselves, reported November 3rd, look pretty solid on a year-over-year basis. Revenue hit almost $599 million.
$599 million, okay.
Which is up a strong 49% compared to Q3 last year. Their subscriber base grew to nearly 2.5 million people.
2.5 million subscribers.
Yep, up 21% year over year. And the average revenue they get per subscriber per month online, that ARPU number, hit $80.
$80, and that's up too.
Up 19% year over year, so customers are sticking around and spending more. And their adjusted EBITDA, which is a measure of profitability, came in at $78 million.
$78 million adjusted EBITDA.
Up a very healthy 53% year over year. So on the surface, looking year over year, things look good. Growth, more subscribers, more revenue per sub, better profits.
But you said that hides some drama from earlier in the year, specifically between Q1 and Q2 and leading into Q3.
Exactly. Those strong year-over-year numbers mask some significant bumps they hit sequentially, like quarter over quarter. There were a few factors driving this. First, just the basic law of large numbers.
Meaning?
Well, their subscriber base has exploded. It's like 6 times bigger than it was back in 2021, so naturally the percentage growth rate is going to slow down. You just can't keep doubling forever when you get this big.
Right, growth gets harder off a larger base. Makes sense.
But there were also some very specific operational and strategic things happening. Management made a deliberate choice, for instance, in their sexual health category. They started shifting away from some of the, let's say, lower quality on-demand products.
What do you mean by on-demand versus cram?
Think like pills you only take right before you need them. Those tend to have higher churn customers come and go. They decided to focus more on premium, often daily use offerings, things that build a consistent habit.
Aiming for better long-term retention, even if it means maybe slower initial uptake?
Precisely. It's a smarter long-term play for customer value, but shifting your product focus like that can definitely cause a temporary slowdown in new signups or total volume.
Okay, so that was one factor. What else caused turbulence?
The really big one, the one that caused the most volatility, was the whole situation with GLP-1 weight loss drugs.
Ah, yes, the Ozempic and Wegovy effect. That market exploded.
It absolutely did, and HIMS jumped on it. That category drove insane hypergrowth for them in late 2024 and early 2025. Their overall revenue growth actually peaked at a staggering 111% in one quarter. It was like catching lightning in a bottle.
But wasn't that growth based on something kind of temporary, a regulatory situation?
Exactly right. They were able to offer compounded semaglutide, that's the active ingredient in Ozempic and Wegovy. They could do this legally because the FDA had officially declared the branded versions were in a national shortage.
Okay, so the shortage created a loophole for compounding pharmacies.
Essentially, yes. The law allows compounding pharmacies to make versions of drugs that are in short supply to ensure patients can still get access. HIMS leveraged its pharmacy setup, particularly the 503B capabilities, to offer these compounded versions.
But then the shortage ended.
Right. The FDA officially declared the semaglutide shortage over in February 2025. They gave a grace period until May. But after that, the main justification for HIMS selling mass quantities of compounded semaglutide at standard commercial doses, well, it evaporated.
So they couldn't legally sell it in the same way anymore.
Not at those specific dosages that directly competed with the now available branded versions. This forced HIMS into a really tough spot. They had to offboard many of the subscribers who were on those specific compounded semaglutide plans.
Offboard? You mean tell customers they couldn't get their medication from them anymore? That sounds messy.
It was definitely a major operational challenge and probably a reputational one too. And it hit their financials directly and visibly in the second quarter, Q2 of 2025.
How bad was the hit?
It led to the first time ever that their total revenue actually declined from one quarter to the next. It dropped from $596 million in Q1 down to $545 million in Q2.
Wow, a sequential drop. That's significant.
It was. And that ARPU number, the revenue per subscriber, also took a hit sequentially, falling from $84 in Q1 down to $74 in Q2.
Okay, so the GLP-1 boom turned into a bit of a bust, at least temporarily.
Temporarily, yes. The good news is that ARPU bounced back strongly in Q3, up to $80. So they managed the transition. It really highlights the risks of relying too heavily on these kinds of, opportunistic regulatory windows. But credit to them, they handled the offboarding process relatively quickly.
And they still offer some form of compounded weight loss drugs now, right?
Yeah.
Just differently.
Yes, they still offer compounded semaglutide, but they emphasize it's under the legal exemptions for personalized dosages, 503A and 503B rules. So not the standard commercial doses, but customized versions. The volume is much more constrained than during the peak shortage period, but it's still part of their offering. We'll definitely circle back to the ongoing friction around that.
Okay. So despite those growth hiccups and the GLP-1 roller coaster, you mentioned profitability looks strong. That suggests the underlying business model is holding up well.
It really seems to be. Look at their gross margin. In Q3, it was still incredibly high at 74%.
74%. That's huge.
It is. Now, that's actually down a tiny bit from the year before, mostly because these weight loss drugs are just more expensive to source and handle than their older core products like finasteride for hair loss. But still, 74%. You usually see margins like that from software companies, not companies dealing with physical products and healthcare services. It points to really strong long-term profit potential.
And they're managing costs well even while they're expanding so much.
That's what the operating leverage suggests. Their adjusted EBITDA margin stayed flat year over year at 13% in Q3, getting that same margin while revenue grew almost 50%, and they are investing heavily in things like that new Ohio facility. That's pretty efficient.
Where are the efficiencies coming from?
A big one is marketing. As a percentage of revenue, marketing costs actually dropped quite a bit, from 45% in Q3 last year down to 39% in Q3 this year.
So they're spending less on marketing relative to the money they bring in.
Exactly. It suggests their brand is getting stronger, maybe word of mouth is kicking in, and their cost to acquire each new customer is becoming more efficient over time. That's crucial for scaling profitably.
Okay, let's talk about cash flow for a second, because there was a moment, specifically in Q2 2025, where their free cash flow went negative. It was like negative $69.4 million. If the profits and margins are so good, why did they suddenly burn through cash?
Yeah, that negative FCF number definitely raised some eyebrows. Free cash flow, remember, is the cash the business generates after paying for big capital expenditures, or CapEx things like building factories, buying equipment.
Right, so profits were good, but they spent a lot on stuff.
Exactly. Management explained that Q2 was smack in the middle of this massive investment period. They were pouring cash into CapEx for automating their fulfillment centers, buying up infrastructure, getting that huge new facility in Ohio ready to go, and also stockpiling inventory.
Building for the future, basically.
Precisely. When you spend a ton of cash up front to build a factory or buy equipment, that cash goes out the door immediately, making your free cash flow look bad in that specific quarter, even if those investments are going to generate huge profits for years to come.
So it wasn't a sign of operational problems, but rather a planned investment dip.
That's the narrative, and the numbers seem to support it, because crucially, that dip was temporary. In Q3, free cash flow swung right back, and strongly, to positive $79 million.
Okay, $79 million positive in Q3. That's a big swing back.
It is. It shows that when they're not in the middle of a massive CapEx surge, the underlying business throws off a lot of cash.
And they have the money to fund these big investments. How's the balance sheet looking?
Very strong. They pulled off a really smart financing move back in May. They raised $1.0 billion through convertible senior notes.
$1 billion. Okay.
Right.
What are convertible notes?
It's a type of debt that can be converted into company stock later under certain conditions, but the terms they got were incredibly favorable.
How so?
First, the notes carry a 0% interest rate.
0%. So they borrowed $1 billion for free.
Essentially, yes, in terms of cash interest payments until the notes mature in 2030. And second, the conversion price, the stock price at which the notes can be turned into shares, was set at a 38% premium to where HIMS stock was trading at the time.
Okay, walk me through why those terms are so good and show confidence.
It means the investors who bought these notes are basically betting heavily on HIMS' future success. They lend HIMS $1 billion, get 0 interest for 5 years, and only make a good return if HIMS' stock price goes up significantly more than 38% from the offering price by the time conversion happens.
So the market was saying, we believe your stock is going way up, so we'll forego interest.
That's a pretty good interpretation, yeah. It signals strong institutional confidence in the growth story and the management team, and it gave HIMS a huge war chest. They have about $1.1 billion in cash and investments on hand now to really pour fuel on their expansion plans.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because they are taking that billion-dollar war chest, that vertically integrated machine, that AI platform, and using it to make what sounds like the biggest pivot in their history.
Yeah.
Moving from just treating problems reactively to focusing on proactive, preventative, long-term health.
This is absolutely the core strategic shift you need to understand about HIMS and HERS right now. Management literally talks about it as moving from a place people turn to when something's wrong to one they turn to proactively. They want to be part of your ongoing health routine, not just your emergency fix.
Okay, so how does that translate into actual products and services? What's the first phase of this proactive push?
Phase 1 is all about major expansion into new clinical specialties here in the US, specifically targeting areas focused on long-term well-being. And the big one right now is hormone health.
Hormone health.
Yeah.
That feels like a huge, maybe underserved market.
Massive, and often quite stigmatized or poorly managed in traditional healthcare. They're tackling it on two fronts initially.
Which are?
First, for men, they're launching testosterone by HIMS. They're focusing on treating low testosterone, often called low T. But instead of just offering, say, injections, which can be inconvenient, they're looking at options like a daily pill combo in clomiphene and tadalafil.
Making it easier to manage daily.
Exactly. And crucially, the offering includes at-home lab testing, so you can get your baseline testosterone levels checked easily and then monitor how the treatment is working over time.
Testing included. That makes sense for personalization. How's the response been?
Apparently very strong early on. They're seeing good product market fit. But here's the really interesting part for their strategy. Over 60% of the guys signing up for the new testosterone offering were already HIMS subscribers for something else.
60% cross-sell. Wow. So they're successfully selling more services to their existing customers.
That's exactly what it shows. The platform strategy is working. They built trust with, say, hair loss treatment, and now they can offer that same customer a solution for low T. It proves the multi-condition approach, powered by that MedMatch data, can really drive growth and customer lifetime value.
Okay, so that's the HIM side of hormone health. What about for hers?
This could be even bigger. They're launching Menopause by HERS, and this is tackling a monumental gap in women's healthcare.
Yeah, menopause care seems incredibly fragmented and often dismissed.
It really is. You have something like 1.3 million women entering menopause each year in the US alone, and so many of them struggle for years to find care that's comprehensive, affordable, and frankly just takes their symptoms seriously. HIMS sees a huge opportunity to provide that.
What kind of scale are they expecting for menopause care?
They have incredibly ambitious goals here. They believe the menopause specialty can be a major driver for the HERS brand, potentially helping HERS scale towards $1 billion in annual revenue just by itself by 2026.
$1 billion from hers by 2026, driven largely by menopause. That's a huge leap from where they are now.
It's extremely aggressive, yes. It underlines just how big they think this market is and how much value in terms of ARPU and long-term stickiness they expect from providing ongoing hormonal care. These aren't one-off treatments. They're potentially decade-long relationships with customers focused on preventative wellness.
Okay, so hormone health is the near-term focus for proactive care. What comes after that? You mentioned diagnostics and longevity, maybe focus more on 2026.
Right, that's the next frontier, pushing even deeper into preventative and optimization. They plan to launch standalone at-home lab testing soon.
Standalone, meaning you don't need to be getting treatment for something specific.
Exactly. You, as a customer, could just proactively order tests to monitor things, check your hormone levels, screen for vitamin deficiencies, maybe look at genetic markers for health risks, even if you feel perfectly fine, just to stay on top of your health.
So HIMS becomes less of a pharmacy and more of a personal health dashboard.
That's a great way to put it. That regular, proactive monitoring creates this ongoing, very sticky relationship. You're constantly interacting with the platform to understand your body better.
And how does this connect to longevity? That sounds very futuristic.
It leverages all these pieces they've been assembling. The lab testing gives you the data. And remember that peptide manufacturing company they bought? CS Bioco?
Right, the peptide synthesis.
That gives them the capability to create advanced, potentially customized interventions based on your lab results. The longevity specialty would focus on things aimed at optimizing health span, improving recovery, boosting performance, helping you live healthier for longer. This could involve peptides, special coenzymes, maybe even advanced GLP-GIP treatments beyond just weight loss.
Wow. That's a big leap into cutting-edge proactive health.
It is, and you can even see hints of this focus in their other investments. They made a strategic investment in Jurel, a company known for early cancer detection tests. It all ties back to this theme of proactive monitoring and intervention.
Okay, but scaling all of this, multiple complex specialties like hormones and longevity, integrating diagnostics, managing personalized treatments for potentially millions, that requires more than just good tech, right? It needs serious operational and product leadership.
Absolutely. And they recognize that. They realize that to build and manage this incredibly complex, multi-layered platform, They needed talent with experience scaling massive operations, often from outside traditional healthcare.
Who do they bring in?
They made some key hires. For Chief Operating Officer, COO, they brought in Nader Kabani. He's a former Amazon executive.
Amazon. Okay, so he knows logistics and scaling complex systems.
Exactly. His job is basically to build and run the increasingly complex physical infrastructure needed to support all these personalized multi-condition offerings, including things like sterile injectables, which require specialized handling.
Makes sense. What about the technology side, refining that MedMatch AI?
For Chief Technology Officer, CTO, they hired Mo El-Shanawi. His background is really interesting. He was previously the CTO at Cruise, the self-driving car company.
Cruise. Wow, that's hardcore AI and data experience.
Right. His focus is taking that fire hose of new data coming in from the lab testing and using it to make MedMatch even smarter, building out the next-gen AI platform to handle truly deep personalization across all these new areas at massive scale.
And they also brought in someone for product to make sure the user experience doesn't become a nightmare with all these options.
Yep. Dirja Kar joined as Chief Product Officer. She came from Robinhood, where she was VP of Product.
Robinhood, another tech company focused on user experience.
Exactly. Her challenge is to unify the entire platform experience. As a user, how do you navigate potentially hundreds, maybe thousands of treatment options, diagnostic tests, different consultations? Her job is to make it feel seamless, integrated, and not overwhelming from your first interaction to managing multiple complex therapies. These hires are really crucial for actually executing this very ambitious vision.
Okay, domestic expansion, new leadership.
Yeah.
But their ambitions don't stop at the U.S. border, right? You mentioned global plans.
Not at all. They put the pedal to the metal on international expansion this year. The big move was acquiring a UK-based company called Zayi back in July 2025.
Zavi. How much did that cost?
They paid $266 million for it.
Okay, nearly $270 million. What did they get for that?
Quite a lot, actually. It was a strategic buy versus build decision. Zavia immediately gave them 1.3 million existing subscribers in Europe.
1.3 million subscribers, just like that.
Yep. And crucially, it gave them the operational infrastructure, the telehealth platform, the pharmacy connections, the regulatory approvals already up and running in key European markets: the UK, Germany, France, and Ireland.
That's a huge head start in Europe. What's the population reach there?
Those countries combined have an adult population of around 160 million people, so massive potential. Management thinks Zavia will add at least $50 million in revenue just in the back half of 2025.
50 million just for the rest of this year.
Yeah, and they see the long-term potential internationally eventually as a $1 billion plus annual revenue opportunity. Buying Zavia was just way faster and probably less risky than trying to build all that infrastructure and navigate European regulations from scratch.
Smart move. Any other international plans on the horizon?
Canada is next on the list, targeted for 2026.
Canada. What's the angle there?
It looks like they're planning to replicate their U.S. weight loss strategy. They specifically mentioned launching generic semaglutide in Canada as soon as the patent expires there, aiming for a really affordable price point, like C$75 to C$100 a month.
Targeting affordability in a market with nationalized healthcare.
Seems to be the plan. And the market is definitely there. Apparently, 2/3 of Canadian adults are considered overweight or obese. So it's a large, defined market need where they can potentially leverage their cash pay model again.
So adding up the U.S. expansion, Europe, via Zavia, Canada. What's the ultimate global target?
The language they use is ambitious. They talk about aiming to attract over 100 million consumers globally over the long term.
100 million. Compared to 2.5 million now. That's astronomical growth.
It's definitely setting a high bar. It signals they see themselves as a truly global platform eventually, not just a U.S. company with a European side business. This raises an important question. All this aggressive expansion, domestically and internationally, sounds great, but how sustainable is it? Especially when they're facing some pretty intense regulatory headwinds and legal friction, particularly around those GLP-1 weight loss drugs we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's the perfect transition. We have to talk about the regulatory tightrope they're walking. Let's dive back into that compounding conflict around semaglutide.
Okay, so the core issue, as we established, is that the official FDA shortage ended. That removed the primary, clearest justification for him selling compounded semaglutide at standard commercial doses, and it forced them to offboard a chunk of customers back in Q2. However, HIMS hasn't stopped offering compounded semaglutide altogether. Their position is that they are still operating legally. They argued they fall under the exemptions allowed by the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, specifically Sections 503A and 503B, because they are providing personalized, customized formulations.
So their argument is, we're not just making copycat Ozempic, we're creating custom doses or maybe different formulations tailored to individual patient needs, which is what compounding pharmacies are legally allowed to do.
That's essentially the argument, yes. They're leaning heavily on the personalization aspect to justify continuing these offerings. They frame it as putting patients first by providing affordable access through customized options, even when branded versions are available.
Okay, that makes sense from their perspective. But how is that sitting with the company that actually makes the branded versions, Novo Nordisk?
Not well. Not well at all. Novo Nordisk, which makes Wegovy and Ozempic, has been very vocal and critical. They've publicly accused HIMS of, quote, failing to adhere to the law.
Strong words.
Yeah. Novo Nordisk claims HIMS is manufacturing these compounded versions under the, quote, false guise of personalization, and basically infringing on their patents.
So a direct accusation of misusing the compounding rules.
Yeah.
How has HIMS responded to that?
Their CEO, Andrew Dodum, pushed back really hard. He released statements saying the company, quote, refuses to be strong-armed by any pharmaceutical company's anti-competitive demands that try to limit patient choice or affordability.
Wow. So it's a pretty public fight. Access and affordability versus patent rights and Big Pharma's interpretation of the law.
It's the classic Silicon Valley disruptor versus the established industry incumbent playbook, really. It's happening right now in healthcare. Interestingly, though, behind the scenes, HIMS has also said they're in active talks with Novo Nordisk.
Talking to them. About what?
About potentially offering the branded Wegovy injection and maybe the future oral version of Wegovy when it gets approved directly on the HIMS platform.
So maybe a truce. Offer both the compounded, personalized, affordable options and the premium branded options side by side.
That seems like a potential path forward that could resolve some of the conflict, give patients the choice. But as of the last update, there's no final agreement in place. So, for now, this regulatory friction, especially around GLP-1s, remains a significant overhang and risk factor. It really shows how carefully they have to navigate as they push boundaries.
Okay, regulatory battles aside, what about direct competition? We mentioned Amazon earlier as the big potential threat. How real is that, given Amazon's resources?
Amazon is definitely the competitor you have to watch most closely. Amazon Clinic is already offering telehealth for a lot of the same conditions. HIMS started with hair loss, ED, skin issues, and Amazon Pharmacy has that enormous logistics network and customer reach.
So if Amazon decides to really go after this market aggressively, couldn't they just outspend and outscale HIMS? Why isn't HIMS 700,000 square feet of fulfillment just a tiny speck compared to Amazon's empire?
It's a valid concern. Amazon's scale is daunting. But HIMS believes they have some key differentiators that Amazon can't easily replicate, at least not quickly.
Like what? What's the defense against the Amazon machine?
First, remember that vertical integration. HIMS isn't just a marketplace connecting doctors and pharmacies. They increasingly are the pharmacy, the lab, the manufacturer for their personalized products. They control more of the actual healthcare delivery process. Amazon Clinic is still largely a referral service.
Okay, so deeper integration. What else?
Second is brand loyalty, which tends to be surprisingly sticky in healthcare. Once someone finds a provider or a treatment plan that works for them, especially for sensitive conditions, they're often quite reluctant to switch just to save a few bucks or use a different app. HIMS is banking on that inertia. They project really high long-term retention, over 85% for customers who stick around for a while.
So loyalty and the hassle factor of switching healthcare.
Yeah. But the third, and probably most important differentiator long-term, goes back to the data and AI.
MedMatch again.
Exactly. That proprietary MedMatch flywheel, constantly learning from millions of specific interactions within their closed system. That creates a unique ability to personalize and optimize outcomes. Amazon Pharmacy fills prescriptions. HIMS is trying to build a system that improves your prescription over time based on data.
A data moat that's hard to replicate without that specific integrated patient journey.
That's the theory. The deeper HIMS goes into complex, multi-condition, personalized care that relies on their own labs, their own formulations, and MedMatch's intelligence, the harder it becomes for a more horizontal player like Amazon to match that specific value proposition.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, one other point on efficiency and cost. We talked about marketing becoming more efficient, but didn't that GLP-1 offboarding mess and the shift in marketing strategy cause their cost to acquire a new customer, the key to go up temporarily?
Yes, it did. Customer acquisition cost, or CAC, definitely spiked in Q2 2025. It hit the highest level they'd seen.
Why was that?
Couple of reasons. Partly the disruption from having to offboard paying customers while still spending on marketing, and partly because acquiring a weight loss customer in that hyper-competitive GLP-1 market is just inherently more expensive than acquiring, say, a hair loss customer was back in the early days.
So is that higher CAC sustainable?
Well, management emphasizes that even with the higher CAC, the unit economics still work very well. They consistently aim for a payback period of less than 1 year.
Meaning they make back the money they spent acquiring a customer within 12 months of that customer signing up.
Exactly. So even if it costs more upfront to get that customer, the fact that they retain them for a long time, and especially if they can successfully cross-sell them into multiple higher ARPU services like hormone therapy or longevity, the overall lifetime value of that customer becomes much, much higher, justifying the initial acquisition cost. The math still works, according to them.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, the expansion, the vertical integration, the AI, the regulatory challenges, the competition, where does HIMS see itself going long term? What are those big, ambitious financial targets they've set?
They've put some very bold stakes in the ground for 2030.
2030 goals. Okay, what are they?
They're aiming for at least $6.5 billion in annual revenue by 2030.
$6.5 billion. That's more than 10 times their current run rate.
It's a massive leap, yes. And alongside that, they're targeting at least $1.3 billion in adjusted EBITDA.
$1.3 billion in EBITDA. What kind of margin is that?
That would represent a 20% adjusted EBITDA margin, which implies significant profitability at scale.
Okay, those are huge numbers. How realistic is that? Where does that growth come from?
Well, to put it in perspective, think about their current market penetration. Right now, Hims & Hers serves about 2.5 million subscribers. That sounds like a lot, but it's actually only about 0.69%, less than 1% of the total U.S. population.
Less than 1% penetration. Wow.
Yeah, the runway is just enormous. They don't need to capture some crazy high market share to hit those goals. If they could get to, say, just 3% market penetration in the U.S.
What would 3% translate to in subscribers?
That alone would be around 10 million subscribers. And if those subscribers are using multiple services, paying that higher ARPU we talked about, maybe $80 or $100 a month, or even more for things like hormone or longevity care.
Then $6.5 billion in revenue starts to look plausible.
Plausible, yes. Still requires flawless execution, but plausible. Especially when you add in the international growth potential from Zavia in Europe, Canada, and potentially other markets aiming for that 100 million global consumer target. The sheer size of the untapped market, domestically and globally, is what underpins those ambitious 2030 targets.
So what does this all mean? When you boil it down, what's the key takeaway for someone trying to understand the Hims and Hers story right now?
I think the main takeaway is that Hims & Hers is in the middle of this really profound and probably necessary transformation. They're actively evolving from being primarily known as this high-growth, direct-to-consumer wellness brand, the hair loss and ED company, into something much bigger.
Bigger how?
They're aiming to be a comprehensive, personalized, multi-specialty healthcare platform. The focus is shifting dramatically towards preventative care, chronic condition management, and long-term health optimization, not just treating acute issues.
And this whole strategic pivot seems backed by real action. The capital they raised, the key exec hires from tech, the acquisitions, the build-out of that vertical infrastructure.
Exactly. It's not just talk. They are deploying capital and talent aggressively to make this happen, and they're doing it while navigating some significant challenges, like that GLP-1 regulatory situation. The execution so far, despite bumps, has been pretty strong.
So looking ahead, their success really seems to ride on pulling off this complex next phase, right? Especially that move into longevity, at-home diagnostics, really becoming that proactive health partner.
That's the multi-billion-dollar question.
And it leads to a really provocative thought for you, the listener. If Hims and Hers can successfully build this, call it the healthcare equivalent of a Costco membership, for your health convenient, affordable, data-driven, focused on proactive optimization with diagnostics, peptides, personalized plans.
Yeah.
Will people choose that model? Will they opt for that convenience and affordability, potentially outside of their traditional insurance, for managing more and more of their health? And if they do, what kind of ripple effect does that have on the massive $4.9 trillion U.S. healthcare system we have today? A system that's largely built on complexity, high costs, fragmentation, and reacting to problems rather than preventing them.
It really challenges the fundamental way healthcare is operated for decades. It's definitely something to watch.